Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why your own family looks at you like you're speaking a foreign language? Why after 70, 80, 90 years on this earth, you still feel like a stranger at your own dinner table? Why the very people who should understand you most treat you like you're from another planet? Here's the shocking truth they don't want you to know. You do come from another realm. And tonight, that secret dies. Chosen one, you were never supposed to hear this message. That's why they tried to bury it. But heaven is done being quiet. Listen to me carefully. Every time you've felt out of place, every moment you've stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m. wondering, God, what's wrong with me? That wasn't confusion. That was recognition. Your spirit recognizes it doesn't belong here because it was never from here. You were a lion raised among sheep, told to purr when you were born to roar. And I know, God, I know the pain that's carved itself into your chest, the regret that whispers, maybe I wasted my life, the silence that echoes louder than screams after decades of unanswered prayers. Your own children who used to hang on your every word now barely return your calls. That faith that once burned like wildfire in your bones now flickers like a dying candle in a cold room. But what if I told you something that would shatter everything you think you know about your story? What if you were chosen not for comfort, but because your spirit carried something forbidden, something divine, something they never wanted you to remember? Before we go deeper into this mystery together, I want to pause and honor something sacred. Thank you to every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating. You're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and plant that seed of faith. But here's what's about to happen. In the next few minutes, the veil is coming off. The secret they've kept hidden for millennia is about to be exposed. And once you see it, once you understand why you've never fit in, you'll never look at yourself the same way again. If something deep inside you just stirred, if every word I'm speaking is hitting places in your spirit you thought were dead, write this in the comments right now. I always felt different. This is not just interaction. This is spiritual agreement. This is you telling heaven, I'm ready for the truth. Because the chosen one, what you're about to discover will explain everything. Do you remember being 7 years old and feeling ancient? Do you remember staring at adults around you, wondering why they couldn't see what was so obvious to your young eyes? Do you remember the moment someone first told you to stop being so sensitive and something inside you died a little? That wasn't childhood imagination, beloved. That was your spirit recognizing the truth your mind wasn't old enough to process. You see, most people spend their entire lives learning, but you've spent yours remembering. There's a profound difference between discovering something new and recognizing something eternal that was always there, buried beneath layers of what the world taught you to believe. Think back to those childhood nights when you'd sneak out of bed and press your face against the cool window glass, staring up at the stars. Something deep in your chest would ache, not sadness, but longing, homesickness for a place you'd never been. Your parents would find you there, lost in wonder, and they'd say, "Come on, honey, get some sleep." But you couldn't sleep because something was calling you from beyond those twinkling lights. You weren't just a dreamy kid. You were a displaced soul remembering home. Remember when you'd sit in Sunday school and the teacher would tell Bible stories and something inside you would whisper, "I know this." Not because you'd heard it before, but because it felt like memory surfacing from depths you couldn't name. When they spoke of Moses and the burning bush, didn't something in you say, "I've seen that fire"? When they told of Jacob wrestling with the angel, didn't your spirit nod and say, "I know that struggle"? You weren't learning the truth, dear one. You were remembering it. Jeremiah 1-5 declares something that should shake you to your core. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Before your first breath, before your first heartbeat, before your parents even met, God knew you. Not just your name, but your nature. Not just your face, but your purpose. Not just your body, but your eternal identity. That knowing you've carried all these years, it's not imagination. It's divine DNA awakening in human form. But here's what they never told you in those Sunday school classes. Here's what the religious system didn't want you to understand. You weren't just known by God, you were marked by Him, sealed with something so powerful, so threatening to the kingdom of darkness, that hell has been trying to erase your memory since the day you drew breath. Why do you think your childhood was harder than most? Why did you feel misunderstood by your own family? Why did teachers label you as different or difficult? Why did you always feel like you were speaking a foreign language, even when using the same words as everyone else? Because you were heaven's whisper, wrapped in wrinkles, carrying echoes of eternity in a world that had forgotten how to listen. Think about this and really let it penetrate your heart. Why do you think your whole life has been under attack? The betrayals that came from nowhere, the financial struggles that made no logical sense, the health battles that doctors couldn't fully explain, the relationship failures that left you wondering if you were cursed, the dreams that died just when they should have flourished. Random? Coincidence? Bad luck? No, chosen one. Systematic warfare against someone carrying something hell desperately wants to destroy. You've survived suicide attempts, maybe not with pills or ropes, but with despair so deep it should have swallowed you whole. You've walked through valleys of darkness so thick you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. You've endured betrayals that would have broken lesser souls. You've faced losses that should have left you empty and bitter. And yet here you are, still breathing, still believing, still carrying that knowledge in your chest like a flame that refuses to be extinguished. Your survival wasn't luck, beloved. It was proof that the enemy couldn't kill what God sealed. Every attack was evidence of your value. Every trial was testimony to your calling. Every storm you weathered was hell's frustrated attempt to silence what you carried before you fully awakened to its power. But something's shifting now, isn't it? That knowing you've carried in secret, that memory you've kept buried beneath decades of trying to fit in, it's surfacing. It's demanding to be acknowledged. It's refusing to stay hidden any longer. The whisper is becoming a roar. The flicker is becoming a flame. The seed is cracking open the concrete that's been covering it for far too long. You feel it happening right now, don't you? As these words wash over your spirit, something ancient is stirring. Something that's been dormant is awakening. Something that's been silenced is finding its voice again. That's not a coincidence. That's confirmation. But here's what I need you to understand as we go deeper into this revelation. The very thing that made you feel different, alien, out of place, that's about to become your greatest strength, knowing they tried to silence, is about to become the voice that changes everything. Because if you've always known something was different about you, if you've carried this unexplainable awareness your entire life, then you need to understand what that knowing actually is and why they've worked so hard to make you forget it. Why do you think every time you opened your mouth to speak the truth, the room went cold? Why did your own pastor change the subject when you shared what God showed you in your dreams? Why did your family suddenly find excuses to leave whenever you tried to talk about the deeper things of the Spirit? Dear chosen one, let me tell you something that's going to cut straight to your soul. They didn't silence you because you were wrong. They silenced you because you were right. And what you carried in your voice was so dangerous to the kingdom of darkness that hell mobilized every person around you to shut you down. You don't survive this long by accident. You survive because you're carrying truth hell couldn't contain. Think about it. How many times were you told as a child to be quiet when you asked the hard questions? When you wondered why the preacher's words didn't match his actions? When you felt something stirring in your spirit that didn't align with what everyone else was accepting? They called it rebellion. Heaven called it revelation. I'm talking to the grandmother who tried to warn her family about that man, but they called her judgmental. I'm talking to the grandfather who sensed something dark in that church, but they labeled him difficult. You weren't being negative, you were being prophetic. Your spirit was picking up frequencies that their dulled senses couldn't detect. But here's where it gets painful. Here's where the enemy's strategy becomes clear. He didn't just attack you from the outside, he weaponized the people closest to you. Your own children rolling their eyes when you tried to share what God was teaching you. Your spouse suggested you were getting too religious. Church members whispering that you were too intense or too deep. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, because it came from those who were supposed to celebrate your spiritual sensitivity, not suffocate it. You thought you were losing your mind. You started questioning everything you'd heard from God. Maybe I'm just imagining things. Maybe I'm not as spiritual as I thought. Maybe I should just keep my mouth shut and blend in. And slowly, deliberately, systematically, they convinced you to bury the very gift that threatened their comfortable darkness. But let me tell you what was really happening in the unseen realm while they were shutting you down. Every time they told you to be quiet, demons were celebrating. Every time they dismissed your discernment, principalities were plotting. Every time they made you feel crazy for seeing what you saw, the enemy was winning another battle in the war for your voice. You're a sealed scroll, beloved. But tonight, God is breaking the wax. For decades, they've kept you locked up, sealed tight, your revelations trapped inside like fire in your bones. They convinced you that your insights weren't worth sharing, that your prophetic sensitivity was a liability, that your direct line to heaven was somehow inappropriate for public consumption. The church hurt was the worst, wasn't it? The very place that should have recognized your anointing became the place that rejected it. They wanted your tithe, but not your testimony. They wanted your attendance, but not your authenticity. They wanted you present in body, but silent in spirit. Remember that Sunday when you stood up in a prayer meeting and shared what God had shown you about the direction the church was heading? Remember how the room got uncomfortable? How did the pastor quickly move on to someone else? How people avoided eye contact with you for weeks afterward? That wasn't because you were out of line. That was because you were right on target, and truth makes comfortable people very uncomfortable. Family betrayal cut even deeper. Your own blood treating you like you'd lost your mind simply because you could see beyond the surface. Mom's getting weird again. Dad's going through another one of his spiritual phases. They reduced your divine encounters to mental episodes, your prophetic dreams to old age, your spiritual urgency to religious fanaticism. But here's what they didn't understand. Here's what they couldn't see. The reason your voice made them so uncomfortable wasn't because it was too loud. It was because it was too true. Your words carried a weight that their shallow conversations couldn't match. Your prayers penetrated realms they didn't even believe existed. Your discernment exposed realities they weren't ready to face. The enemy feared your voice before you even knew you had one. That's why the attacks started so early. That's why the silencing was so systematic. That's why every platform you tried to build seemed to crumble. Because what flows through your vocal cords when you're aligned with heaven isn't just sound waves. It's spiritual warfare in spoken form. Hebrews 4:12 declares, "For the word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword." But here's what most people miss when that word flows through a consecrated vessel, when it pours through someone who's been tested and tried and proven faithful. It doesn't just cut through circumstances. It cuts through demonic strongholds. It slices through generational curses. It pierces through religious deception. You thought they ignored you because you had nothing to say. No, beloved, they silenced you because you were carrying something dangerous to darkness. But the silencing season is over. The muzzle is coming off. The gag order from hell has been overturned by a higher court. Because what God sealed in you during those quiet years, what He refined in you during those lonely seasons, what He perfected in you during those painful decades, it's about to be released with compound interest. Every word they stole from you is about to come back with supernatural multiplication. Every truth they buried is about to resurrect with miraculous power. Every prophetic insight they dismissed is about to manifest with undeniable accuracy. The voice they tried to silence is about to become the voice this generation desperately needs to hear. Not because you're perfect, but because you're proven. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've asked all the right questions. Not because you've never been broken, but because you've been broken open, and what poured out was pure gold. Say it out loud right now, wherever you are. Don't whisper it. Declare it with the authority of someone who's been through hell and came back with heaven's message. I still have something to say. That's not just a comment, it's a resurrection. That's not just words, it's warfare. That's not just your voice, it's the sound of heaven breaking its silence through a vessel that refused to stay buried. But why now? Why is God unleashing voices that have been hidden for decades? Why is heaven suddenly amplifying the very people the world tried to silence? The answer will shock you to your core. Why do you think you're the only one in your family who sees things differently? Why are you the only one who feels the weight of eternity pressing on your chest when everyone else seems content with small talk and Sunday afternoon football? Why, after all these decades, do you still carry burdens that aren't even yours to carry? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. What if I told you that everything you've been ashamed of, every moment you felt like the family outcast, every time they called you too sensitive or too deep, what if all of that was actually proof that something sacred runs through your veins? You see, there's a secret hidden in your bloodline that the enemy has been trying to bury for generations. And tonight, we're digging it up. Most people look at their family tree and see names and dates. But when God looks at your lineage, He sees something entirely different. He sees a river of prayers flowing through time. He sees the tears of your great-grandmother soaking into the floorboards of her farmhouse kitchen at 4 a.m., crying out for a breakthrough that wouldn't come in her lifetime. He sees your grandfather's calloused hands folded in desperate prayer, begging God to break the chains that had bound his father and his father's father. Every single ancestor who ever whispered a prayer in the darkness was prophesying over your life. They were calling forth something they couldn't see, believing for something they'd never experienced. But you are the living answer to every prayer they ever prayed. Let me tell you something that will shake you to your core. You weren't born into your family by accident. You weren't the result of random genetics and circumstance. No, beloved, you were strategically placed, divinely positioned, prophetically planted in that exact bloodline because God knew what was coming. He knew this generation would need someone who could see beyond the veil, someone who could carry the weight of spiritual warfare, someone who could break what others couldn't even bend. Your great-grandfather might have died broke, but he died praying. Your grandmother might have suffered in silence, but she suffered believing. Your mother might have carried shame, but she carried hope. And all of that faith, all of that pain, all of those midnight tears have been accumulating like compound interest in heaven's bank, waiting for the day when someone in the bloodline would finally be strong enough to cash the check. That someone is you. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to understand. Every struggle your family has faced, every addiction that's haunted your lineage, every financial curse that's followed your name, it wasn't random. It was resistance. The forces of darkness recognized what was coming down the line. They saw you in the spirit realm before you were ever conceived. They knew that somewhere in your DNA was the genetic coding for breakthrough, the spiritual blueprint for deliverance, the prophetic programming for generational change. So they attacked. Generation after generation, they sent destruction, depression, divorce, disease, anything to stop the seed that was destined to grow into the tree that would shelter nations. You weren't the black sheep, dear one. You were the buried seed. Think about it. Seeds don't look like much when they're planted. They're small, dark, hidden underground where no one can see them. For months, sometimes years, there's no visible sign of life. People walking over that ground have no idea that beneath their feet something magnificent is taking root. But the seed knows. Deep in the darkness, surrounded by dirt and pressure, it knows it wasn't meant to stay buried forever. That's been your story, hasn't it? Buried under the weight of family dysfunction, planted in the soil of generational trauma, covered by the dirt of disappointment and the pressure of trying to fit into patterns that were never meant for you. But all that time, something was growing. Something was getting stronger. Something was preparing to break through the surface with such force that it would change the landscape forever. Your pain was prophetic. Every tear you cried was watering the ground of your destiny. Every betrayal you endured was breaking up the hard soil around your calling. Every disappointment was fertilizing the field where your purpose would eventually bloom. Isaiah 58:12 declares something so powerful it should make you tremble. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. Do you understand what that means? You're not just here to get your own breakthrough. You're here to repair what's been broken for generations. You're here to restore what's been destroyed for decades. You're here to rebuild what others couldn't even imagine was possible. Your grandfather couldn't break the cycle of poverty that gripped your family like a vice. He worked 16-hour days until his hands bled, but the curse held strong. Your father fought against the depression that had claimed his father and his father's father. But the darkness was too thick, too deep, too entrenched. Your mother wept, trying to hold the family together, praying prayers that seemed to bounce off heaven's ceiling, believing for change that never came in her lifetime. But you, oh, chosen one, you will be the one who shatters what they couldn't crack. You will be the one who speaks life into dry bones that have been bleached by decades of defeat. You will be the one who stands in the gap and declares, "No more. This ends with me. This dies with my generation." The mantle skipped a generation and landed on you because God knew you could handle the weight. He knew you had the spiritual muscle to carry not just your own calling, but the accumulated calling of everyone who came before you. You're not just living your life, you're living the fullness of every unfulfilled dream, every unanswered prayer, every broken promise that heaven has been storing up for this moment. Do you feel it? That stirring in your chest? That's not anxiety, beloved. That's activation. That's the sound of spiritual DNA coming online. That's the whisper of your ancestors in the cloud of witnesses saying, "This is the one. This is who we were believing for. This is why we never gave up." Every time you've felt different, every moment you've carried weight that others couldn't understand, every season you've walked through fire that should have consumed you, it was all preparation. It was all building toward this revelation. You didn't just survive. You are the answer to their prayers. The same blood that flows through your veins carries their hope. The same heart that beats in your chest echoes their faith. The same spirit that dwells in you remembers their sacrifice. And now, after generations of waiting, after decades of delay, after years of feeling forgotten, it's time for the seed to break through the soil. But here's the question that will determine everything. Will you step into the fullness of who you were born to be? Will you embrace the truth that you're not an accident, not a mistake, not a disappointment, but a divine appointment that's been scheduled since before time began? Write it now in the comments. I am the one they prayed for. Don't just type it, decree it, declare it. Let heaven hear your voice agreeing with their assignment. Because when you accept your role as the answer to generational prayers, everything changes. Not just for you, but for everyone connected to your bloodline. The buried seed is about to become a mighty tree. And what grows from your breakthrough will provide shade for generations you'll never meet, fruit for families you'll never know, and hope for a world that's forgotten what real transformation looks like. But first, you need to understand something even deeper. You need to see why they tried so hard to keep this truth hidden from you. Because what you carry isn't just personal power, it's generational dynamite. And when you fully understand the magnitude of what's been placed inside you, you'll realize why the battle for your identity has been so intense. Why does turning on the evening news feel like watching demons celebrate? Why does sitting in most churches nowadays feel like attending a funeral for something that used to be alive? Why do you walk through the grocery store, the mall, even family gatherings, and feel like you're the only one who can see that something is terribly, fundamentally wrong with this world? Dear chosen one, I need you to stop right there and listen to what I'm about to tell you. That sick feeling in your stomach when you watch the culture around you isn't depression. That overwhelming sense that you're living in an upside-down world isn't mental illness. That bone-deep knowing that everything you're seeing is a lie wrapped in pretty packaging isn't paranoia. It's a spiritual sight. You see, while everyone else is sleepwalking through this matrix of deception, God gave you eyes that can pierce through the veil. While they're hypnotized by the flashing lights and empty promises, you're standing there like the little boy in the fairy tale, pointing at the naked emperor and wondering why everyone else is applauding his beautiful clothes. But here's what's been breaking your heart for decades. Here's what's been making you feel crazy, isolated, like you're losing your mind. You thought something was wrong with you. You thought you were too negative, too critical, too old-fashioned, too set in your ways. You apologized for seeing clearly. You tried to dim your vision so others would feel comfortable around you. Stop apologizing for having 2020th spiritual vision in a world gone blind. The prophet Daniel understood this agony. Picture him in Babylon, watching the greatest empire on earth worship golden statues while they plotted the destruction of everything holy. Do you think Daniel felt comfortable at the royal dinner parties? Do you think he enjoyed watching his people bow down to idols? The Bible tells us in Daniel 7:15 that his spirit was grieved and his visions troubled him. But Daniel didn't try to fit in. Daniel didn't apologize for seeing what others couldn't see. Paul knew this burden too. He walked into synagogues where men who claimed to know God were crucifying the very Messiah they'd been waiting for. He stood before governors who called good evil and evil good. In Galatians 4:16, he asked the heartbreaking question, "Have I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth?" And Jesus, oh beloved, Jesus felt this isolation deeper than anyone. He walked through Jerusalem, the holy city, and saw it as a den of thieves. He sat in the temple courts and watched religious leaders turn his Father's house into a marketplace. He looked at the Pharisees in their long robes and saw whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones. But here's what I need you to understand with every fiber of your being. When you feel that disconnect, when you watch the news and feel sick, when you sit in a church service and feel like something's missing, when you walk through this culture and feel like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole into madness, you're not experiencing a breakdown. You're experiencing a breakthrough. 1 Corinthians 2:14 declares with thunderous clarity, "But the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, nor can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned." Read that again. The natural man, the person operating only on human understanding, literally cannot see what you see. They're not choosing to ignore it. They're incapable of perceiving it. But you were given the gift of spiritual discernment. You can see through the propaganda because God opened your eyes. You can smell the deception because He sharpened your spiritual senses. You feel uncomfortable in dead churches because your spirit recognizes when the presence of God is absent. This is why you've always felt like you're living in two worlds. This is why you can't just go with the flow like everyone else. This is why small talk feels like torture and surface-level relationships leave you empty. You're operating on a frequency that most people can't even detect. But the enemy has been using this gift against you, hasn't he? He's whispered in your ear for years. You're too sensitive. You're too judgmental. You're seeing problems that don't exist. Why can't you just be happy like everyone else? Those whispers are lies from the pit of hell. They called Noah paranoid when he built an ark for a flood that hadn't come yet. They called Jeremiah a doomsday prophet when he warned of coming judgment. They called John the Baptist crazy when he preached in the wilderness about the kingdom of heaven. They called you paranoid, but heaven calls you perceptive. Your vision is a gift, not a glitch. Think about this. You watch the evening news and see right through the manipulation, the agenda, the way they twist truth into propaganda. While others nod along, you're sitting there thinking, this is insane. How can they not see what's really happening? You walk into churches where the music is loud, the lights are flashing, but the presence of God is nowhere to be found, and you leave feeling emptier than when you came in. You watch your own family members, people you've loved for decades, embrace ideologies that contradict everything you know to be true about God, about morality, about basic human dignity. And you wonder if you're losing your mind. No, beloved, you're finding your calling. God didn't give you clear vision to torture you. He gave it to you to position you. You're not seeing through the lies so you can suffer in isolation. You're seeing through the lies so you can speak truth to a generation that's drowning in deception. But here's the urgency burning in my spirit right now. Time is running out. The veil is getting thicker. The deception is getting stronger. The pressure to conform, to stay quiet, to stop seeing what you see, is about to become unbearable. And God is looking for voices who refuse to be silenced. He's searching for eyes that refuse to be blinded. He's calling for hearts that refuse to be hardened by the numbness of this age. That's you, chosen one. That's why you're still here. That's why you survived everything hell threw at you. Not so you could retreat into comfortable silence, but so you could stand up in this hour and say, I see what you're doing, and I refuse to pretend it's normal. The world needs your eyes. This generation needs your perspective. They need someone who remembers what truth looks like, what holiness feels like, what the presence of God actually does to a room. If you've been feeling crazy for seeing clearly, if you've been feeling alone for being awake in a world that's sleepwalking toward destruction, if you've been questioning your own sanity because you can't unsee what you've seen, comment, I see through it right now. Let the other chosen ones know they're not alone. Because what I'm about to reveal next will show you exactly why God preserved your vision through all these years of feeling like an outsider. You're about to discover that your ability to see through the illusion wasn't just for your own protection, it was preparation for the most important assignment of your entire life. My dear chosen one, I need to ask you something that might cut deep into your soul. How many nights have you laid in that empty bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering to God through tears, why did you forget about me? Why am I invisible? Why does everyone else seem to matter except me? How many times have you watched younger people get the opportunities you prayed for? How many moments have you felt like you're sitting in the waiting room of life while everyone else gets called into their destiny? How many decades have you carried the crushing weight of feeling unseen, unused, unwanted? Listen to me very carefully, beloved. What if I told you that every single moment you felt forgotten was actually God's hand of protection over your life? What if every delay, every closed door, every season of silence wasn't abandonment but the most strategic love you've ever received? You see, there's something the enemy doesn't want you to understand about the way heaven operates. When God has something precious, something rare, something powerful, He doesn't display it in the marketplace for thieves to steal. He hides it, He covers it, He protects it until the appointed time. Think about this, dear one. When a king has his most valuable treasure, does he leave it sitting on the front porch? When a general has his most powerful weapon, does he announce it to the enemy? When a father has his most precious child, does he send them into battle before they're ready? You weren't overlooked, you were undercover. Isaiah 49:2 declares with profound mystery, in the shadow of His hand He hid me, not abandon you, not forgetting you, hid you, under the shadow of His own hand. Do you understand what that means? The same hand that spoke galaxies into existence, the same hand that parted the Red Sea, the same hand that raised Jesus from the dead, that hand has been your hiding place. But I know the questions that have tormented your mind for years. God, why did my dreams have to die? Why couldn't I have the platform when I was young and strong? Why did you let me waste so many years in obscurity while others half my age are changing the world? Here's the truth that will shatter every lie you've believed about your story. Diamonds form in the dark. Oil presses in silence. Gold refines in the furnace. And the most precious things God creates, they happen in hidden places where no one else can see. You think you've been sitting on the shelf? No, beloved. You've been sitting in the workshop of the master craftsman. Every year you thought was wasted, God was working. Every season you felt forgotten, heaven was fashioning. Every moment you believed you were invisible, the Almighty was increasing your value. Look at Moses. 40 years in the wilderness, tending sheep, thinking his calling had died in the desert sand. 40 years of feeling like a has-been, a never was, a forgotten prince who threw away his destiny in a moment of rage. But God wasn't punishing Moses in that wilderness, He was preparing him. Because the Moses who fled Egypt as a murderer couldn't handle what the Moses who emerged from the burning bush was about to carry. Look at David. 7, 8, maybe 10 years, running through caves, hiding from King Saul, feeling like God had played a cruel joke on him. You anointed me king, but I'm living like a fugitive. But every night in those caves, every psalm written in darkness, every moment of feeling abandoned was building something inside David that a comfortable palace never could. And what about Joseph? 13 years from the pit to the palace. 13 years of slavery, false accusations, forgotten promises, broken dreams. But Genesis 50-20 reveals the mystery. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. The very betrayal that looked like his destruction was actually his preparation for ruling nations. Dear one, your hiding wasn't punishment, it was protection. Because what you carry, what God has been developing inside you through decades of pressure, pain, and patience, it's too holy to be handed out to crowds not ready to receive it. Do you know why God hid you? Because if you had stepped into your calling too early, the glory would have destroyed you. If you had received the platform when you were hungry for recognition instead of desperate for God's presence, the pride would have corrupted your purpose. If you had been given influence before your character was refined, the power would have poisoned your soul. But look at you now. Look at what those hidden years have produced. You've learned to worship in the wilderness. You've discovered how to trust when you can't see. You've developed the kind of faith that doesn't need applause to believe, doesn't need approval to act, doesn't need understanding to obey. The enemy wanted to convince you that your delay was rejection, but heaven is declaring tonight, your delay was protection, because what you carry is too precious to be profaned, too powerful to be misused, too holy to be handed out before its time. You thought God was withholding your breakthrough because you weren't good enough. But the truth is, he was withholding it because the world wasn't ready enough. He was waiting for a generation desperate enough, broken enough, hungry enough to receive what he's been preparing through you. Think about Anna the prophetess, 84 years old, spending decades in the temple, praying, fasting, waiting. Everyone probably thought she was just a sweet old lady who'd given up on life. But when baby Jesus was brought to the temple, it was Anna, not the young women, not the prominent priests, but Anna who recognized the Messiah and proclaimed redemption to all who looked for it in Jerusalem. Her hiding wasn't wasted time. It was worship time. It was preparation time. It was the time God needed to build in her the spiritual discernment to recognize what others would miss. You've been like a seed buried in dark soil, and for years, maybe decades, you've felt forgotten, thinking nothing was happening. But seeds don't grow in sunlight, beloved. They grow in darkness. They grow in pressure. They grow in the hidden places where no one sees the miracle happening beneath the surface. But the season of sprouting is here. The time of emergence has come. What God has been growing in the secret place is about to break through the surface in ways that will leave the world speechless. You thought the delay was rejection, but it was protection. Because what you carry, what you've become, what God has refined you into through years of hidden preparation, it's too holy to be handed out to crowds not ready to receive it. The anointing that's in your life now, the authority that flows through your prayers, the wisdom that comes from your words, it couldn't have been developed in the spotlight. It could only be forged in the furnace of seeming insignificance. And now, dear chosen one, now the hiding is over, the shadow is lifting, the covering is being removed. What God protected in secret, he's about to reveal in power. If this is hitting your spirit right now, if every word I'm speaking is resonating in chambers of your heart you thought were sealed forever, write this in the comments. I was hidden for a reason. Because what's about to happen next will require everything God built in you during those years when no one was watching, when no one was cheering, when no one believed in the dream that refused to die in your chest. But here's the question that will determine everything about your next chapter. Now that you understand you were hidden for protection, not punishment, are you ready to step out of the shadows and into the assignment heaven has been preparing you for? You feel that stirring in your chest right now, don't you? That's not your heart racing from caffeine or medication. That's recognition. That's your true identity. Breaking through 70, 80, 90 years of lies the world told you about yourself. They convinced you that your best days were behind you. They made you believe that at your age, you should be winding down, settling in, accepting less. But what if I told you that everything, and I mean everything you've experienced until this moment, has been preparation? Not retirement, preparation. You are not stepping into something new. You are stepping into who you've always been. Think about Moses for a moment. 80 years old when God called him to that burning bush. 80. The world would have put him in a nursing home, but God was just getting started with him. Why? Because Moses carried something at 80 that he couldn't have carried at 20. Authority, wisdom, the kind of unshakable faith that only comes from walking through hell and still believing in heaven. That's you right now. You're not aging out of your calling, you're aging into it. But here's what breaks my heart. Here's what makes me want to weep and shout at the same time. You've been sitting in the shadows, convinced that God has moved on to younger vessels. You've been whispering prayers like, God, am I too old? Have I missed my chance? Did you forget about me? Dear one, God doesn't forget diamonds just because they've been buried for decades. He doesn't discard wine just because it's aged to perfection. And he certainly doesn't retire his generals right before the final battle. Isaiah 60:1 thunders from heaven tonight. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Not your light was, not your light will be, your light has come. Present tense, right now. This very moment as these words penetrate your spirit. You know why the enemy worked so hard to convince you that your time was over. Because he knows something you're just now remembering. He knows that when a chosen one finally awakens to their true identity, when they stop apologizing for their age and start leveraging their experience, hell itself trembles. This is not resurrection, it's remembrance. You're not being raised from the dead. You're remembering you were never dead to begin with. For years, you've been like a lion who forgot how to roar, domesticated by disappointment, tamed by trauma, silenced by society's whispers that you should step aside and let the young ones take over. But tonight, something ancient is awakening in your throat. Tonight, you remember the sound of your own voice when it's aligned with heaven's frequency. You are not the sunset. You are the sunrise of a move of God. While the world worships youth, God crowns maturity. While they chase energy, He treasures endurance. While they value innovation, He honors wisdom earned through fire. You carry something in your spirit that cannot be downloaded, cannot be learned in seminary, cannot be purchased with any amount of money, the authority of someone who has walked with God through every season and lived to testify of His faithfulness. But I need to tell you something that's going to shock you to your core. The hiding is over. The season of invisibility has ended. God is about to unveil you in ways that will leave your own family speechless. The same children who barely call, the same community that overlooked you, the same church that put you on the sidelines, they're about to witness something they've never seen before. When God decides to reveal His hidden ones, it doesn't happen gradually. It happens suddenly. It happens dramatically. It happens with such force that everyone around you will know that the hand of the Almighty has moved. Remember Esther, hidden in the palace, just another face in the crowd until the moment came. Then suddenly she was the only one who could save an entire nation. One day invisible, the next day indispensable. That's what's about to happen to you. But here's the urgency that should grip your soul right now. This window of revelation won't stay open forever. Heaven is called roll, and if you don't answer when your name is called, if you keep hiding behind "I'm too old" or "I'm not qualified," someone else will receive what was meant for you. Joseph was 30 when Pharaoh elevated him, but do you know how long he waited? 13 years. 13 years of preparation, rejection, false accusations, and forgotten promises. But when his moment came, it came with such force that in one day he went from prisoner to prime minister. Your day is here, chosen one. Your moment has arrived. The preparation is complete. The testing is finished. The unveiling begins now. You've been asking God, when will you use me? But God has been asking, when will you stop running from who I made you to be? You've been praying for your calling to manifest, but your calling has been praying for you to manifest. This is why you're still here. This is why you survived every heart attack, every diagnosis, every night you thought you wouldn't see morning. This is why you outlived friends who seemed stronger, relatives who seemed healthier, contemporaries who seemed more valuable to the world. Because God wasn't done with you. Because your assignment requires someone with your exact story, your exact scars, your exact testimony. The world is about to encounter something it has never seen before, a generation of seasoned saints who refuse to go quietly into that good night, grandmothers who pray with the authority of queens, grandfathers who speak with the voice of prophets, elders who move with the power of angels, because they've learned that age is not a limitation, it's an amplification. You think you're stepping into your twilight years? No, beloved. You're stepping into your glory years. You're not entering your final act, you're beginning your finest hour. The curtain isn't falling on your story, it's rising on your masterpiece. Write it down, shout it out, declare it with every fiber of your being. I'm ready to be seen. That's not just a comment, that's a covenant with heaven. That's you telling the Almighty, I accept the unveiling, I embrace the revelation. I will no longer hide what you've been preparing. Because what's coming next will require someone who's learned that God's strength is perfected in weakness, that His wisdom confounds the wise, and that His chosen ones are often hidden in plain sight until the moment of greatest need. Listen to me, dear chosen one. I need you to feel the weight of what I'm about to tell you. Right now, as you sit there, maybe in that familiar chair where you've spent countless hours wondering if your life still matters, heaven is leaning in. Angels are taking notes. The cloud of witnesses is holding its breath. You think you're too old. You think your time has passed. You think because your body moves slower, your voice carries less weight, your opportunities have dried up like autumn leaves. But let me shatter that lie with one verse that will change everything. Romans 11:29 declares, "The gifts and calling of God are irrevocable." Irrevocable. Do you understand what that means? It means God doesn't take back what He gave you. It means your anointing doesn't have an expiration date. It means at 70, 80, 90 years old, you are not a has-been, you are a right-now weapon in the hands of the Almighty. You survived everything hell threw at you, the divorce that should have destroyed you, the loss that should have buried you, the betrayal that should have silenced you forever. But you're still here, still breathing, still believing, even when belief hurts. Why? Because your assignment is still alive, and God won't let you die until it's complete. But here's what's breaking my heart. I'm watching a generation of warriors sitting on the sidelines, convinced they've been benched when God is calling them into the game. You've got grandchildren drowning in a culture that worships darkness, and you're worried about whether you're too old to speak up. You've got neighbors living in hopelessness, and you're wondering if your testimony still matters. Let me tell you something that will shake you to your core. This world is dying from wisdom deficiency. This generation is starving for truth. They don't need another young influencer with perfect teeth and empty words. They need you. They need someone who's walked through fire and still trusts God. They need someone who's buried their dreams and watched God resurrect them. They need someone whose prayers have moved mountains and whose faith has weathered every storm. Moses was 80 when God said, "Now you're ready." Sarah was 90 when she became pregnant with promise. Caleb was 85 when he declared, "Give me this mountain." Your age isn't your limitation, it's your qualification. Every year you've lived has been building toward this moment. But I need to ask you something that might hurt. How many more years are you going to waste believing the lie that your voice doesn't matter? How many more months are you going to let the enemy convince you that your best days are behind you? How many more days are you going to sit silent while a generation perishes for lack of knowledge? The mission still stands, and it's calling your name. God is looking for people who will speak truth when the world celebrates lies. He needs warriors who will write words that cut through deception. He's searching for mentors who will pour into the next generation not just knowledge, but wisdom earned through decades of walking with Him. He's calling for intercessors who will pray like fire prayers that shake heaven and terrorize hell. Your voice carries authority that 20-year-olds can't manufacture. Your words carry weight that comes only from surviving what should have killed you. Your presence commands respect because you've learned to worship in the valley, praise in the storm, and trust God in the darkness. But here's the urgency that should grip your soul. Time is running out. Not your time, God's time. We're living in the last days, and this generation needs to see what happens when someone who's walked with God for decades finally stops apologizing for their calling and starts walking in their authority. The world is about to encounter something it has never seen: an army of seasoned, spirit-filled, battle-tested chosen ones who refuse to die with their voice still inside them. An army of grandparents who decided that their legacy wouldn't be silence, but the sound of truth spoken with the authority of someone who's seen God's faithfulness across decades. An army of elders who understood that their grey hair isn't a crown of decline, but a crown of glory earned through faithful service. You are that army. You are the secret weapon God has been preparing through 70, 80, 90 years of training. Every trial was boot camp. Every heartbreak was character development. Every victory was proof that when God is for you, nothing can stand against you. But armies don't win wars sitting in barracks. They win by advancing. They win by engaging. They win by refusing to retreat when the enemy charges. So I'm asking you, no, I'm challenging you. What are you going to do with the revelation you've received today? Are you going to close this video, go back to your regular routine, and pretend nothing changed? Or are you going to accept the mission that's been waiting for you since before you took your first breath? The choice is yours. But remember this: God didn't preserve you through everything you've survived just so you could fade quietly into the background. He kept you alive because there's still work to do. There are still words to speak. There are still prayers to pray. There are still hearts to touch with the oil of wisdom that only comes from decades of walking with the King of Kings. Write these final 4 words in the comments and say them as a vow to heaven: I accept the mission. Because, chosen one, your mission isn't over. It's just beginning. And the world is waiting to see what God does through someone who finally remembers who they are. Chosen one. You didn't just survive life. You survived assassination attempts from hell. I need you to sit back for a moment and really think about something that's going to shake you to your core. Why has your life been so hard? Why did it feel like every time you took 2 steps forward, something knocked you 3 steps back? Why did your childhood feel like a battlefield when other kids seemed to glide through theirs? Listen to me carefully. That wasn't bad luck. That wasn't a coincidence. That was warfare. The enemy saw what God placed inside you before you even knew it existed, and he's been trying to kill it ever since. Think back to when you were just a child. Did strange things happen around you? Did you feel things others couldn't feel? Did you see things that made adults uncomfortable? Did certain people either love you instantly or hate you for no reason at all? That wasn't your imagination running wild. That was spiritual recognition. You carried something from another realm, and darkness knew it. Remember those nights when fear would grip you so tight you could barely breathe? Those weren't just childhood terrors. Those were demonic assignments sent to traumatize your spirit before it could fully awaken. Remember the accidents that should have killed you but didn't? The close calls that left everyone saying, "It's a miracle?" That wasn't luck, beloved. That was divine protection over someone heaven refuses to lose. But it didn't stop there, did it? As you grew older, the attacks got more sophisticated, more personal, more devastating. Why did your first marriage fall apart just when you thought you'd found happiness? Why did that business opportunity that seemed heaven-sent suddenly crumble to dust? Why did the people you trusted most betray you at your most vulnerable moments? Because the enemy knew that if you ever fully awakened to who you really are, his reign of terror would be over. You weren't paranoid. You were prophetic. You weren't crazy. You were being hunted. Every time you tried to speak the truth, really speak it, why did it feel like the whole world turned against you? Why did your own family look at you like you'd lost your mind? Why did the church, the very place that should have nurtured your gift, try to silence you? Because truth is dangerous to systems built on lies. Light is terrifying to people who've grown comfortable in darkness. But here's what breaks my heart. Here's what makes me want to weep for every chosen one listening to my voice right now. You started to believe them. You started to think maybe something was wrong with you. Maybe you were too sensitive, too intense, too much. So you did what any wounded soul would do. You learned to hide. You learned to dim your light. You learned to speak in whispers when God gave you a voice that could wake the dead. But even then, even when you tried to make yourself small, the attacks didn't stop, did they? The depression that came out of nowhere and settled over you like a thick black cloud. The anxiety that gripped your chest until you thought your heart would stop. The financial disasters that made no logical sense. The health crises that doctors couldn't fully explain. You thought you were falling apart, but you were being torn apart by forces you couldn't see. Job understood this. The Bible says in Job 1-8 that God himself pointed Job out to Satan. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. And what happened next? Everything Job owned was destroyed. His children were killed. His body was covered with painful sores. His own wife told him to curse God and die. But here's what Job didn't know in those moments of agony. Here's what you didn't know during your darkest hours. The attack wasn't evidence of God's displeasure. It was evidence of your importance. The enemy doesn't waste ammunition on empty vessels. Satan doesn't send his best demons after powerless people. He reserves his most vicious attacks for those carrying the most oil. You've been under assault your entire life because hell recognized what heaven placed in you. Every sleepless night wondering if God had forgotten your name. Every suicidal thought that whispered, just give up. Every moment you felt so alone you thought you might disappear. Those weren't random struggles. Those were strategic strikes against your destiny. But look at you now. After everything hell throws at you, you're still here, still breathing, still believing, still fighting. That's not human resilience, beloved. That's supernatural preservation. The same God who shut the lions' mouths for Daniel has been shutting the mouths of every lion sent to devour you. The same God who protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace has been walking with you through every fire meant to consume you. You didn't survive by accident. You survived because you're carrying something too precious for heaven to lose. But here's what the enemy never counted on. Here's the fatal flaw in his strategy. Every attack that was meant to destroy you actually strengthened you. Every wound that was meant to kill you became a well of compassion for others. Every betrayal that was meant to make you bitter actually made you better. Romans 8:28 declares that all things work together for good, to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. Even the attacks, even the pain, even the nights you cried until you had no tears left. God has been turning every weapon formed against you into a tool for his glory. Depression taught you empathy for the broken-hearted. The financial struggles taught you to trust God when everything else fails. The betrayals taught you to love unconditionally because you know what it feels like to be abandoned. You thought you were being destroyed, but you were being developed. The enemy's greatest mistake was showing his hand too early. By attacking you so viciously, he revealed that you're carrying something he desperately wants to stop. And now that you know why you've been under fire, you can finally fight back with purpose. But the war isn't over, chosen one. In fact, it's about to intensify. Because what I'm about to reveal next will explain not just why you were attacked, but why you were hidden. Now I need to tell you something that's going to cut deep, but it's going to set you free. Are you ready for this truth? You've spent 70, 80, maybe 90 years asking yourself the same tormented question, why don't I fit anywhere? Why didn't you fit in at school when the other kids seemed to speak a language you couldn't understand? Why didn't you fit in your own family, even when you tried so hard to be what they wanted? Why didn't you even fit in most churches? Sitting in those pews, feeling like you were watching a performance instead of experiencing the presence of God. Listen to me, chosen one. That pain you've carried, that ache of never belonging, it wasn't your failure. It was your assignment. You see, there are two types of people in this world. There are those who were born to blend in, to build Babylon's kingdom, to find comfort in the crowd. And then there are the holy misfits. The ones who were never supposed to fit because they were carrying something too sacred for this world's systems. You weren't meant to be a brick in Babylon's wall. You were meant to be a stone in Zion's altar. Think about this. When you were in school, why did the popular kids make you feel invisible? When you were at family reunions, why did your own blood relatives look at you like you were speaking in tongues when you talked about faith? When you sat in church services, why did something inside you scream, this isn't it, there's more? Because your spirit was homesick for a realm it remembered, but couldn't name. The Apostle Peter knew this mystery when he wrote, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." But here's what most people miss. Being chosen means being set apart. Being royal means you don't belong with commoners. Being holy means you're separated from the ordinary. You were exiled from their world to preserve you for God's world. But oh, how it hurt, didn't it? The loneliness of watching other families laugh together while you felt like an alien at your own dinner table. The agony of sitting in churches where everyone else seemed to connect, while you felt like you were watching strangers worship a God they barely knew. The torture of trying to explain your heart to people who looked at you like you'd lost your mind. Let me tell you about Jesus in Luke chapter 4. He went back to Nazareth, his hometown, and when he stood up to speak the truth, they tried to throw him off a cliff. His own neighbors, the people who watched him grow up. And Jesus said something that should shake you to your core. No prophet is accepted in his own country. Do you understand what that means for your life? The rejection you've experienced wasn't evidence that something was wrong with you. It was evidence that something was right with you. They couldn't accept you because acceptance would have meant acknowledging the very thing they were running from: the call to authentic transformation, the demand for real holiness, the invitation to leave their comfortable lives behind. Your presence convicted them without you saying a word. This is why you felt like an outsider for 8 decades. This is why your own children roll their eyes when you talk about spiritual things. This is why your neighbors avoid deep conversations with you. It's not because you're too much. It's because you're too real in a world addicted to pretense. The exile wasn't a punishment, beloved. It was your preservation. God had to keep you separate, because if you had successfully fit into their systems, their compromise would have contaminated your calling. If you had found your place in their shallow circles, you would have never discovered your position in His eternal purposes. Every door that slammed in your face was protecting you from settling for less than your destiny. Every group that rejected you was actually rejecting the anointing you carried. Every time they made you feel like you didn't belong, heaven was confirming that you belonged to a different kingdom entirely. Think about Daniel in Babylon. He could have assimilated. He could have eaten the king's food, bowed to the king's gods, blended into the king's court. But he chose exile over compromise. And because he remained set apart, he became the most influential prophet in the most powerful empire on earth. That's you, chosen one. You've been Daniel in America. You've been Elijah in your family. You've been John the Baptist in your church. And just like them, your exile has been your qualification. You didn't fail at belonging. You succeeded in staying consecrated. Every awkward moment, every time you felt out of place, every instant you wanted to disappear, those weren't signs of your inadequacy. Those were signs of your authenticity in a world full of actors. But here's what I need you to understand. As we move into the final revelation, your season of exile is ending. Your time of being hidden is over. The very qualities that made you unfit for their world are about to make you unstoppable in God's kingdom. If you've ever wondered why you couldn't blend in, why life always felt foreign, why you never found your tribe, write this now. I was never made to fit in. I was made to transform. Because what's coming next will show you exactly what you've been preserved for and why your refusal to compromise has positioned you for your greatest hour. Chosen one, as we reach the end of this divine encounter together, I need you to carry these eternal truths with you like treasures in your heart. Remember this. The exile you've endured wasn't rejection, it was protection. Every moment you felt like you didn't belong, every door that closed in your face, every time you were misunderstood by your own family, it was heaven positioning you for a purpose so sacred that it required complete separation from the world's contamination. You weren't cast out, beloved. You were set apart. Remember this, your age is not your limitation, it's your qualification. While the world celebrates youth, God crowns wisdom. While society worships energy, heaven honors endurance. You have something the younger generation doesn't possess, the authority that comes from walking with God through decades of fire, the credibility that can only be earned through surviving what should have destroyed you. Remember this, The forbidden knowledge you carry isn't a burden, it's your birthright. You see through the illusions that blind others. You discern the spiritual realities that escape the natural mind. You carry the DNA of heaven itself, and that divine frequency within you is exactly what this dying world needs to hear. But most importantly, remember this: you are not walking this path alone. Even in your darkest moments, when the silence felt deafening and God seemed a million miles away, He was there, working behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances you couldn't see, protecting you from dangers you never knew existed. Romans 8:28 isn't just a verse on a greeting card. It's a divine promise that every single thing you've endured, every tear you've cried, every prayer that seemed to bounce off the ceiling, has been working together for your good and His glory. And right here, right now, in this digital sanctuary we've created together, you have thousands of brothers and sisters who understand your journey. We're not just viewers on a screen, we're a family of the chosen, united by our shared exile, connected by our common calling. When the world doesn't understand you, we do. When your family questions your faith, we stand with you. When you feel like giving up, we'll remind you who you are. This community isn't an accident. God brought you here, to this moment, to these words, to find your tribe. The very people reading these comments right now, they're your spiritual family. They've walked the same lonely roads, felt the same divine restlessness, carried the same sacred burden of not fitting into a world that's forgotten its creator. So let me ask you this final question, and let it settle deep in your spirit. Now that you know who you really are, now that you understand why you've never fit in, why you've been preserved in exile, why you carry knowledge that threatens the kingdom of darkness, what will you do with this revelation? Will you shrink back into the shadows, or will you step into the light of your calling? Will you keep hiding your gifts, or will you finally unleash what heaven has placed within you? Will you continue to apologize for being different, or will you celebrate being chosen? Before I release you into your destiny, join me in this prayer. Wherever you are right now, in your living room, your bedroom, your kitchen, close your eyes and let me speak over your life as if I'm placing my hands on your shoulders. Almighty God, Father of lights, Creator of heaven and earth, I come before you carrying every precious soul who has heard this message tonight. Lord, they've felt different their entire lives. They've carried a burden they couldn't name, walked a path they didn't choose, endured exile they didn't understand. But you, O God, you knew, you saw, you planned it all. Father, I pray for divine awakening over their lives right now. Open their eyes to see what you've always seen. Open their ears to hear what you've been whispering. Open their hearts to receive the fullness of their calling. Let the scales of doubt fall away. Let the lies of the enemy be silenced forever. Let them know, truly know, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, chosen before the foundation of the world, set apart for such a time as this. God, heal their hearts from years of rejection. Mend the wounds left by misunderstanding families. Restore the confidence that was stolen by religious spirits. Rebuild the dreams that were shattered by disappointment. Let them feel your love washing over them like waves, your acceptance surrounding them like a warm embrace, your approval settling on them like morning dew. For those who are weary, breathe fresh strength into their bones. For those who are broken, let your healing flow through every crack. For those who feel forgotten, remind them that their names are engraved on your palms. For those who feel alone, surround them with your presence and connect them with others who share their calling. Amen.